So thank you everyone for making time to attend this session. It's a real privilege and an honor to be standing here to share some of our common experiences on how we have taken data into insights, and then more importantly, we converted those insights and inspired action from our marketing team and other parts of our commercial teams. So in this presentation, we will focus more on when we took the insights and how did we convert into inspiring action. There have been lots of talks of taking data and making them insights, so we'll focus less on that part today. So Laurie and I, we have a case study to share. It was one of our favorite projects that we did and put a lot of heart into it. But after creating an insightful report, what we realized was that it was still falling short of creating the action, meaning the marketing teams were not imbibing those insights and converting them into a marketing and a launch strategy. So we had to do some creative soul searching on what's lacking, and after that, some creating strategies to fix those gaps. And that's the experience of the case studies and the nuggets, tips, and tricks that we want to share with you. Hopefully, some of them will resonate with you and you will find them useful in your day-to-day work.
We should just say these opinions and facts are actually ours, not our organization's. I forgot to put in the disclaimer slide. So
yes, absolutely.
Please, if you are asked by any Abbott corporate attorney, we told you that up front.
This is our disclaimer. This does not represent views of Abbott Labs or Abbott Diabetes Care. These are solely ours, and we will be held responsible for anything we speak or share here. Okay, so I guess when we think about insights team or high impact insights teams in the organization, let's do some soul searching. What is a real job? What is the job that we are paid to do? What is the job that makes us come to work day after day? Is it to discover insights that are actionable? Surely, I guess everybody will agree to that. That's an important part of our job. But does it stop there? There is something more to it. Are we able to communicate those actionable insights? Because as you can see, we all are aware of those studies and those great analysis that we have done, but they are kind of shelved. So unless they are communicated to someone who is supposed to act on them, those insights have limited value. So certainly communicating those insights is a big part of our job. And I think there are several courses and several best practices on presentation, storytelling that all of us have heard or will have an opportunity to hear. But going beyond it, can we stop at communicating those actionable insights? Or do we think our job is to inspire action based on insights? And if we all agree that this third bullet is an important component, or maybe some would dare to say the most important component on our jobs, that we have to inspire action based on insights, then really some work has to be done. So let's look at, is there an issue? Or as market insights professionals, we are able to inspire actions consistently throughout the organizations we work in, or at some times we fall short of it. So in my team, I hear these things. When something does not go well, or people are doing or redoing things, we say, but research had predicted this. So the insights people knew when things do not go as well. I also hear my team say, if only they would have listened. Many times, many of our team members say, I said this several times. And they act, and Laurie's nodding her head, and they act as if this is the first time this point is being raised. So something happens between our ability to communicate and by there I mean our commercial teams, marketing teams, R&D teams, or senior management. So anybody who we consider as a client within Market Insights team, they would have listened. Then also, many times my team comes to me and say, we already knew this. So when a new research is being done or some analysis of something that didn't go well is gone, my team says, we already knew this. Then why does this happen? If we know so many of these things and we think we have communicated it, we think that we have said it several times, why doesn't it translate into action? So when you think about inspiring action, who comes to mind? Several great leaders and business leaders or political leaders come to mind. But one of the common one we hear is Martin Luther King. He inspired action. What happened? What is the difference between his approach and, say, approach of a market insights team? So we start with an executive summary. The issues listed here are exactly the things that Martin Luther King was talking about and wanted to change. But if he had done this presentation, probably none of us would have remembered Martin Luther King or the presentation. Instead, he took a different approach. He involved the people, he communicated them, he made them own the dream. And I think the morning speaker, Adam Adler, he said too, that people get more inspired when they can own the thing. He even said, I think gave an example in the keynotes he was giving this morning, that people like names that have letters or alphabets that are in their names. So you see, as a species, human beings, I think we are pretty self-focused. So unless you make someone own the insights or make them own the ideas that you want them to own or communicate, want them to own, it is not going to result into action where they feel that they are responsible or the idea came from them. And that has been a challenge that my team and I have been facing in our careers. So if we have an issue to resolve, if insights team are still falling short of inspiring action, what should we do? So this was the result of a soul searching we did. We said, Einstein knew this long back, that if we keep doing the things the way we do, even though they are rooted in best practices, they are rooted in insights practices, yet the action is not happening, then there's something has to change. And unless we change something, we cannot expect the results to be different. So we took a lot of onus on ourselves and made a deliberate attempt with one of our projects that we are going to share, where we took a totally different approach to sharing the quantitative insights that we had found. So the case study is from a multi-country physician segmentation that we did. It was a very well done study, large sample size, methodologically it was very superior, very strong, very stable. We got some very actionable insights and we created a good presentation. Laurie was the lead on the project. I can totally vouch for it.
It was great.
We worked with some great market research vendor partners, but yet what we realized was that the things did not change. We had discovered insights that were actionable and we had communicated actionable insights, but the marketing team was still doing more of what they were doing. The commercial team did not have this study as the cornerstone for their launch plans, when we in the insights team thought that's totally their launch plans as well as the communication plans for the launch should be based on the insights found in this study. So we went and did some analysis of ourselves, like what are the roadblocks that were stopping the action from happening. So there was a group of people, and not everybody was in the same place, but there were some people in the marketing team that didn't understand the data. They were not those quantitative type people. They didn't understand what segmentation means. They could not, despite our best efforts, they just didn't get, the data didn't get to them. But then there were others who understood the data, but they just felt that this will probably not help the business, or the connection that this action or this insight that we are presenting will help them grow the business and be a more successful launch. That trust didn't build with that study. So that was the second step. And the third, there were others who thought they understood the data. They also thought it will help, but they just didn't feel the connection to the data, or they just didn't know how to own it. So these were the three levels of barriers that we analyzed happened within Abbott Diabetes Care when we did that study. So we found that we have to take each one of them and then find a solution, like a true insights team. We analyzed the problem and then we wanted to bring about solution. So we said we have to increase the exposure of the data to those who do not understand it through our insightful reporting. So we have changed our approach to the reporting, and Laurie will share some of those best practices, and we presented a different report to most of those people. After that, some of those people who really don't understand the data, it wasn't hitting their hearts or wasn't sticking with them, we took another approach. Besides presenting the market research findings in a report, we did a lot with storytelling. We called that immersion. We did several sessions of immersing the data with our target stakeholders, and that worked very well. But finally, before the action could happen for the launch planning, we did several sessions of co-creation and critical reflection, which we called applying the data or the application of the data to the business. So it was a 3-step process that we followed, and the results were totally different. Today, this study is quoted not only within diabetes care, but in wider Abbott as one of the very actionable studies. Our vice president, he basically gives credit to this study for growing the business. So the product that we launched in Europe has reached success beyond our wildest imagination. The product has really taken off. Actually, it is cited as one of the successes, like a blockbuster drug, because we'll reach almost like 1 billion with that product later in the year. And they give a lot of credit for that successful launch of that product to this study. So that's why we thought that probably we do have some tips and tricks that you may find useful for your purposes. So the core of what we did is what Confucius has found in 16th century. The ultimate wisdom is like, I hear, I forget. I see, and I remember. I do, and I understand. So this was the basis, fundamental, what we used in making our market research insights and inspiring action with them. And we will take you through the case studies on what we did in each of these points and how did we apply this Confucian wisdom to our day-to-day work.
So the first problem, we talked about it. There are people out there that just don't understand the data, and we need to figure out how to make it real. In this case, it was a roadblock, because what we found is that although we had head nods in the room, everybody was on the same page when they walked out the door, we weren't hearing them talking about our customer segments or our HCP segments. We weren't hearing them using it in the decision-making that they were doing. So we took a step back and said, well, maybe we got it wrong when we were doing the reporting. So we thought really carefully about changing our perspective. So instead of thinking of them as our clients, we started thinking about them as our audience. And it sounds really basic, but once you shift your perspective, you start asking different questions in advance of doing the report, such as what are their communication preferences? This can be Myers-Briggs, it can be even the difference. We have people that run the gamut from the people who need the elevator pitch as the sole total of their takeaways, you know who I'm talking about, to the people who need all the detail in advance of buying into your conclusion. So we had the range there. We also looked at what they need. What is their mindset coming into it? Do we need to change their mindset, or do we just need to educate them? We need to look at what's the best way to communicate from a learning perspective. Is this something that we would do better visually versus a PowerPoint? And trust me, we're addicted to our PowerPoints. And then the last thing is level of knowledge. We had situations where the people in the room had some working knowledge of what we were doing, and other people, it was a brand new construct for them. So we needed to think about when we were communicating this, if we needed to reach out to people in advance of the main session to bring those other people along the way so that they were at the same level place when we were talking about the data. Because you know, you only get an hour, maybe an hour and a half to communicate things, and you can't cover everything. And then lastly, you need to think about what's the right way to get the most bang for your buck, because again, you're only going to get a certain amount of time with these people to get it in their head, so make it more effective. Same thing, then we started to take a look at the way we were communicating the data. Was it really a story that we were telling people? And that means we collected, with any segmentation study, you collect a ton of data, and you could tell people everything you learned, and as a researcher, we're curious. So we go, this is really interesting, they need to know this. But fundamentally, they probably don't. They probably just need to answer a few key questions, like why are these segments different from one another? And then, which ones do we focus on? And then how are we effectively going to reach them? So you need to structure the story in all of your communications in light of those business questions you have. And then, for the people who you believe are not going to get on board, anticipate the roadblocks, the things that they would challenge you on, and build that into your story so that it flows, so that you can say after the conclusion, and then you get the question from the audience, and you go, okay, I thought about that, here's the next story about why this is true. And include the so what. So oftentimes, we tend to get decks that basically describe what's on the page, right? It tells you what the finding is. It's not really a conclusion. And if you don't get to the so what, you're not going to get them to think about the information in the context of what they should be doing with it. And lastly, and I think this is something that was kind of a no-brainer, but it was pretty pivotal, and I have an example on the next slide, your visuals should support your point. It shouldn't be that you're telling one thing and showing one other thing, or making them work and figure out what you meant with the visual. And I'll give you an example, and it's not from this study, but we learned that we could use PowerPoint to our advantage. So this data is actually made up data that's exactly the same on either side. But if you look at it in a quick moment, you know exactly what the one on the right is saying. You don't really know, the conclusion is brand C is growing, or the finding is brand C is growing. But you'd be hard pressed to tell that on the slide on the left, right? So if you make the other data go into the background, you focus on what you want people to take away, and you make the headline, what's the business question? How do we stop brand C? So that's a basic example, but you can break those rules using PowerPoint to make it more effective. So the other thing that Ruchi mentioned is we had some challenges and we needed to communicate with different people. So what we did, and this is visual, you'll see Ruchi is in it, we had 5 segments. So what we did is we recruited the other members of our team, and each of them was charged with learning about the segment, and basically we had them show up at a company meeting. In essence, they portrayed those segments and acted like them during this session, and it made it real in a way that our PowerPoint deck never could. So even though we had shown people and described the characteristics and things like that, it made it fun, but it also made them able to see the differences. And because it wasn't as scripted as your PowerPoint deck is, the people who were telling the stories or acting out the things had to learn about it in depth. But then they're also really good at communicating the differences and making it transparent.
And getting basically introverted team of insights professionals to do that was no small challenge. But we had to push them, again, believing what Einstein had said, that if we keep doing the same thing, which we are good at, which is presenting the data confidently, and it's not getting us to the desired action, then we need to do something differently. And my team then agreed that, okay, we will do the role playing, and we'll act like doctors. And it worked. It did work.
And the lab coats helped. So we didn't do this alone. A lot of the storytelling resources are out there. We thought we'd flash these on the screen. These were 2 that we found particularly helpful, the people who specialize in helping you think through how to tell a story.
Okay, so I'll take the second barrier, which was they don't trust it will help the business. So there was some element of trust, though even after they understood the data, after our creative presentations and our storytelling, our role play, there was some skepticism still left that how valuable what you're telling me is in my real life business situations. So what we did was, we said let them see it for themselves. And with the segmentation, thankfully, it's a little bit easier to do if you put your minds and heart to it. What we did was that we made a video with real doctors for them. We said, let's demonstrate it. We will show you a video just, okay, so we invited key opinion leaders who were the real physicians, and they were representing different segments to speak at a commercial meeting. So we did basically an immersion session with real doctors who are from different segments with our marketers and commercial leaders. So they found that these segments are real, and they're real customers in the field, who their salespeople interact with, are going to see those differences. So it's better that they understand the differences of these physicians. And then we created a video with real physicians, and I just want to show you a minute of that because I think it will help you understand what we are trying to do here.
Their patients. Partnering innovators and economical empathizers tend to be highly empathic and encourage patient engagement.
It didn't.
Show the video.
Yep.
You can ask him, he can.
Yeah, he's coming up. It didn't. We minimized and it didn't show up.
That's always the risk when you use too much technology. That can happen in real meetings.
And it was too big of a file to embed in the PowerPoint, but.
So anyhow, till he plays the video, when we made the video with real physicians who belong to the 5 segments. So sometimes we do qualitative research and then quantitative. Here we went the other way. After the quantitative, we again went and did qualitative research and created a video to demonstrate what we were
using
trying
glucose
to do.
data to teach patients.
I want them to know as much about their diabetes as possible, and their diabetes, as opposed to me knowing about diabetes, so that they increasingly run the consultation.
Disease-focused experts and frugal traditionalists tend to be less empathetic towards the patient.
So look, you're not coming back to my clinic anymore, we're not getting anywhere, you're not taking any of my advice, you're still having a terrible lifestyle. I think for my sake and your sake, and particularly my sanity, please, I suggest you go to another specialist. I do my job simply because I need an income, number 1. I do my job, number 2, because it's intellectually challenging.
An HCP's attitude.
So as you can see, after you see these real physicians, and because they were from the market, so some of our commercial teams from the UK recognized these people, and it was so obvious that you can't message to these people, you can't sell your product to these people in the same way. They are fundamentally different segments or different people, or their needs are different. So that really helped us hit the home that, you know, how the messaging has to be crafted and the targeting has to be crafted by physician types. Again, no rocket science, a basic example, but it was something that really worked for us because it was based on real physician video. Okay.
So lastly, on this section, we talked about the fact that they don't know how to own it. Now, you know, it's research that comes from the research team, but fundamentally, if they are not able to act when you're not in the room on the information that you conveyed, you haven't really accomplished your goal. So in our case, we think about it from making them own the research in a way that they can carry it forth within the organization. So think about it, you're turning your clients into evangelists on your behalf. So we did this and been working on this through things that allow them to co-create. So they're helping create the story about the segments or the story that's being carried forth in the organization. And we also force them in the exercises we do to really critically reflect on whether or not something belongs or not. So for this is not going to be a one-stop thing. You actually have to do a workshop. And usually we find it most effective to do at least a half a day, because in some cases you're going to need to convey to them the information and then allow them to go through that process, learning process, and then have the opportunity to work on it and apply it. We've used this, so co-creation is important. The other piece is that depending on, again, we talked about this as belonging to other quantitative studies. You can do this and change the perspective. Our case study was about our target audience, but you can change that and make it about your competition, to do something related to war games or key stakeholders, like in this instance, an HCP perspective versus the patient perspective versus the payer perspective. All of those will work. And the most important thing is that we found it really does help if you make it competitive, because people are a little bit more invested in listening and focusing and getting it right when there's something on the line. And trust me, we reward with things like candy and little tchotchkes. We're not talking a fortune, but it's an important part of making this effective as a technique. So one of the things that's pretty basic, and many of you may have tried this already, is doing things that are game-like. So we created, and there's an example in the appendix of a Jeopardy game where we did it with facts. And so it's good for large groups. People can call out the answers, compete against one another. We do that with large teams. You can also do a quiz. We did a mix and match quiz where we had statements from the customer point of view, and you had to guess where they belonged. And they weren't always that easy to do. So again, that's a technique that you can use. We've also gone beyond that to the co-creation phase, which is what our theme was in talking about it. And this is a template, and I'll show the resource for it on the next slide. But it's taking it a step further. So actually asking them with the information they do to create their own story. So basically, they have to decide who the cast is. They have to decide what the key themes are that they're going to represent. They have to have a problem that they're solving for and that the product solves for. And they get to do the elevator pitch for the movie marquee poster. So all of those elements, and in fact, even the cast and crew selection, when they're describing them, it makes it real for them in a way that just talking about them doesn't. Besides which, it's always funny to see the visuals. So here are some tips there. Basically, the template provider is the one at the bottom. They do the same thing for movie, for magazine headings and things like that, tools that can help you, or you can just use flip charts. Really, it's not that much of a rocket science. But remember I said the prizes are important? Well, in this, theme them. So it's like, even if they don't get it right, give them a prize for who came up with the most creative story, or the most insightful one, and the one that really is going to win that Oscar, because it makes it fun in the learning. Plus, you have the opportunity to coach them through the process. So if you feel like the key themes are not on point, they can do this. And what we normally do is we assign, in this case with the segmentation, we assign each group a target audience, and they have to create a story for that target audience. The elements, those things that we talked about already, the storyline is very important, the themes are very important, because if they don't get the basic stuff right, doing the creative part really doesn't help you. So it also helps you understand what they really ingested or took in from things. So did they get it right? There's your opportunity to course correct before they go out and talk in the organization and keep getting your segments mixed up with one another, because they know the names, but they don't really know them. In this case, they'll end up really knowing them. And the more fun they can have with some of the elements, like defining the cast, which giving them a funny name, also descriptive of your segment, it really does make it go in deeper. And most importantly, that movie marquee poster that I talked about, for our audience, that we have those people that really do need things in sound bites, that's an excellent way to convey it. So the other technique that we've used, I call it the box game. I don't know if it has a better name than that. But in this case, what you do is you basically get people together and you encourage them to discuss and decide what fits. But what's in the box is like 5 to 7 things that relate to all of the segments. So you have all of the information in there. And we do it like we did examples of that. Could be like something that would indicate their age, like a driver's license, or something that would indicate whether or not they were proactive or not, like and had a list of things to do. So you do things that represent all of the segments, and then during the game, they have to correctly identify things that belong to the segment because they're all in there. So they get tasked with one segment to tell a story about using the things in the box, and they have to pick out the right things. But the best part about this is it's not whether or not they get it right or wrong. It's usually there are things in the box that more than one group will choose to represent their segment. So arguing over who it really belongs to is a way for them to critically reflect and decide and make a case for why they're right. And that's where some of the magic comes in terms of making sure that they understand things very well. So I did the same thing here in terms of giving you materials and things like that. Again, I can't swear enough, the prizes are really important. So you give the people that you encourage that cross-functional challenging, because you give a prize for the best challenge, like someone who everybody agrees after they're done that they were in fact wrong. That's a prize. You can give the best rationale for a wrong answer, meaning they sold you on the idea that it could have been true even though you never intended it to be representative of that group. So the other thing you can do is you can recruit people, and in this case we recruited our clients that were principally responsible for owning the segments in the organization from a marketing perspective. We had them be our helpers so they could go around answering questions. They became subject matter experts with regards to the HCP segmentation. And so they were better able to be shown as knowledgeable. They learned it in advance. They learned more through the exercise. It made it really powerful. And then lastly, you should have judges, and judges that have a good sense of humor, because you can have a lot of fun with this.
Okay. So the last thing I want to share with you is how we took our team of competitive intelligence professionals who were doing a lot of good desk research and analysis and raised them in the organization to become strategy consultant for the organization. And we did it by 2 things. One is combining competitive intelligence and primary research together, and then doing these workshops where our clients, which included marketing people, commercial people, R&D folks, people from manufacturing, come together and do these simulation exercises. So we called it competitive and stakeholder simulations. These are just some templates to help you, and we will be happy to share more resources with you if this is of interest to you. But what we do is we take a typical war gaming that I'm sure all of you know about, where you make small teams act like your competitors and come and attack or with proactive or reactive messages against your launch strategy. So we do that kind of a wargaming. We break the people into various companies and make them think about how our competitors will react with key messages as well as tactics against us. And they will target both physicians, patients, and payers. All these three are important stakeholders for us. So we do this as a workshop. But what we do more importantly beyond or adding to the competitive wargaming is the stakeholder simulation. We break those teams into stakeholders. So they have to think about as payers, as physicians, and patients, and simulate that market environment where they will then react to the messages and tactics of our competition. Because whatever the competition may do, it's not likely to be effective if they are able to persuade and impact the behavior change in either payers or physicians or patients, which are relevant for our healthcare business. These are the three critical stakeholders. All those, I'm sure other industries can identify their stakeholders and do the simulation-based workshops accordingly. So we get into the mindset of these stakeholders, and we have to remind people that the most important step in doing this successfully is being able to take off our shoes, say, as our organization. In our case, it's Abbott Diabetes Care, because we are so tuned and so wired to think as we think as our company. So really to put them into the shoes of our stakeholders, think if you are the patient, if you are the person who has diabetes and you need this product and all these competitive products are there in the market, how will you react to all this? That's a big step. But once they get into the shoes of the stakeholders, they have found almost always this exercise to be very valuable. And after the competitor and stakeholder simulation, we come together as becoming back Abbott Diabetes Care and say, what does it all mean to us? And the implications that come out of it and the action planning that comes out of it is so much closer to the heart of our stakeholders because they themselves sat and talked about it and got it. So we have found that this simulation workshops, along with all the other things that we have shared, has been really critical in our success in making our function more action inspiring and becoming a function that has a seat on the table when critical decisions are being taken in the company. So to conclude, the process that seems to work with us is we make them hear what we have to say, because as an insights team, it's very important that their decisions and thinking is fact-based, and we do that through insightful reporting. Laurie shared some tips and tricks there. But we take that hearing into more of that learning using storytelling or like trying to get to their heart or their right brain and left brain. We want to target both of them. Those people who are more data oriented versus those who are more storytelling or nuggets oriented, we target them both. We think about our audience as segments too. And then lastly, where we have found a lot of success in helping our client teams apply their learning or own them, which happens in these co-creation and critical reflection type of workshops that we have explained several to them. So all projects will not require all this extensive kind of thinking, but you can pick and choose based on your situation to just go beyond sharing of a report to like doing something more. And I think that's what has really helped us.
And I would say one of the best things is now when we go into qualitative research after this, we'll hear people say, he's a partnering innovator, isn't he? And they're doing it not based on what we did from a typing tool, they're basing it on what they're hearing the person and how they describe their management